hello there. Yes, well, still not getting any more exciting, is it? Yes. Anyway, Nigel Farage, because I'm always told it should rhyme with garage, so we're going to call him that, I think, from now on. Anyway, yesterday was moaning and making a lot of political capital about the fact that a couple of individuals had thrown things at him. He's not going to be intimidated by the left-wing mob, he says, which is an interesting way of thinking about numbers, whereby a mob about a year ago, if it was a Twitter mob, would always be 3 people, but now apparently a left-wing mob is just an individual. One has to ask, though, are they lone wolf operatives? Anyway, talking of left-wing subversion, I thought today we'd do a bit of a sidetrack and have a look at some of that sort of contemporary thinking that's out there, which is becoming a lot more pervasive in the right wing of British politics. And any future leader of the Conservative Party, be it Nigel Farage or be it Robert Jenrick or maybe another, but those are probably the 2 front runners at the moment, are going to be heavily invested, just to use a Graham Linehan term, in the notion that the left have effectively taken over everything, because about 20 years ago we all had a meeting and we all agreed that's what we were going to do. But it's worthwhile just thinking about where this stuff comes from. So I'm going to show you a clip today from a very recent piece on New Cultural Forum with Peter Whittle and a couple of the others sort of discussing where this stuff comes from. So let's just have a look at that first of all.
Yeah, she's just highlighting this as a kind of a plan of what's happening. I mean, it'd be interesting to see what both of you think. I mean, I would say probably we are in that phase now, but you could also say
we are in the
destabilisation phase. But you could also argue that we've gone through the crisis and maybe we're at normalisation now, because there are so many things like the anti-Semitism that we're seeing that are now just go under the radar and are seen as normal. But she's very concerned, about communism and Islamism and those 2 things coming together.
That's right. It is basically American Marxists. Are basically the basis of this. Islam or Islamism, does she say?
I think she says Islam.
Islam, yes, and then
political Islam.
Yes, and then also, our old friends, the Chinese Communist Party. Does this ring as true to you as it does?
Well, I've been saying for years that we're now in a post-revolutionary society, so it chimes in very well with exactly what I've said. And, Bezmenov, I've long spoken about it. I wrote about him in our last book as well. And he talks all about this, media, culture, education. This is all part of the long march through the institutions. You demoralize a society by focusing on their students, because that is those 25 years, that generation. And if you bombard them with enough information, he says, for example, you can tell them how wonderful communism is and bombard them with this stuff. Then if you took them to Siberia, to a gulag, and actually showed them, they wouldn't believe it, because they've been so indoctrinated. And that's what we're seeing as a result with the youth of today. And it's quite correct to call this American Marxism. And I think actually increasingly we should get away from calling things woke and use this term of American Marxism. I mean, American Marxism actually came from the Frankfurt School and from the Italian communists originally, but in its current form, it is the greatest threat to Western civilization. And, people think about Marxism as an economic model. And James Lindsay writes about this very well, spoke about this. He referred to Marxism as being a genus, like a cat. You have lions, you have tigers, you have tabby cats and letters and cheetahs. Those are all subdivisions of a cat. And same thing with Marxism. You have economic Marxism, which is the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, which is an attack on capitalism. But then you have radical feminism, which is an attack on masculinity. Then you get critical race theory, which is another form of Marxism, which is an attack on whiteness. Then you have queer theory, which is another form of Marxism, which is an attack on heterosexuality. And then you get the decolonization movement, which is an attack on the West. And you add all of that together through intersectionality, and you have the erosion of our entire civilization. And then add to that the fact that Marxists are also atheists, and of course you have the erosion of the church. So I think it's about time we did speak about it in those Marxist terms. What the left like to do is they like to say, oh, well, cultural Marxism is an anti-Semitic term. A lot of rubbish and nonsense. Nothing.
Yes, well, there you have it, you see. Back in the 70s and 80s, the very, very nasty people in the Soviet Union worked with the KGB, and American Marxists, lovely phrase, to persuade us that we should take on board the notion that if you get a gay man and an immigrant and a woman in a room, that we should listen to them. Yes, maybe not, for those three, but there we go. Yeah, it's that long march through the institutions thing, and Americans have kind of sort of gripped onto a guy named Yuri Bezimov, who was a kind of minor Soviet official who may or may not have been actual KGB, who defected and made a living by effectively telling very rich Americans what they wanted to hear. He's been resurrected by a variety of people, and he's become a kind of icon for people like Douglas Murray, who are absolutely convinced the reason why nothing works isn't because capitalism is a bad system which is on its last legs, but because people like me are working hard at it. Now, you can think what you like about that, it's fine, but thinking about the line of the psychologist in The Terminator, you see, the beauty of this is it requires no evidence whatsoever. So it's shifted now, so it's no longer the Soviet Union because that entity doesn't exist, so it's now whatever your favourite hate figures are. So it's people like me, educated and well-read. It's the Islamists, obviously, because why not, And the Chinese Communist Party, who can now just take the place of the USSR as the big bogeyman, pulling all the strings. But if you think about it, the reason why things are falling apart is due to capitalism. It isn't being kicked magically by people from the inside. It is doing its own kicking. It's always been doing its own kicking. And these people fall into that very adult trap of believing that because things seemed more stable when they were younger, that therefore something else is happening now. It isn't, okay? If you look at the history of anywhere on a macro level from 1600 onwards, okay, it is a tale of people being displaced by the forces of capitalism, being impoverished, being made into workers, losing the commons, losing their basic rights, and having, in a lot of cases, to have truncated and shortened lives. And now that particular tiger is eating its tail, and that post-war stability has been shredded, the last of that post-war stability has been shredded, these people are waking up to the fact that maybe there's a problem. But of course it can't be their glorious view of the stability of the system. It has to be an outside nefarious force. So they just invent one. But the problem, as I'm sure you're aware of what I'll be coming to, is that these people will be in charge of the Conservative Party very much in real terms in the very near future. They are already 99% of the right-wing stuff that you see presented to you in the British media. Julia Hartley-Brewer, all of the crew at GB News, anything out of Tufton Street, Liz Truss, the list is almost endless. Some of them are true believers, but a lot of them are quite happy just to be paid by that big American money, yeah? And that, my friends, is really scary, because it ain't us that's in charge, it's them. And a worldview like that basically treats almost anything that's been progressive, because let's face it, in sort of thinking about Hobsbawm or someone like that, their view of history, a sort of populist, properly Marxist view of history, is that the reason why we have democracy is to protect ourselves from the worst excesses of capitalism. But they don't believe that capitalism is bad. It's not bad for them anyway. So they will get rid of that, because after all, that'll make everything better, won't it? Because we know the benefits that capitalism brings. We only have to look around the world, and the sights are there in front of our eyes. And their problem with us, of course, is that we've read the history books, and we know that that's a lie. And they hate us for it. Anyway, That was a bit depressing, wasn't it? Anyway, I did like the stuff about the cats, so I'm going to forever be thinking of individual cats as different aspects of Marxism. That's going to cheer me. Thanks for that, Rafe. I might forgive you for the tie. No, I won't. Do have a lovely heading towards the weekend day. Yeah.